Hi, this is Dr. Michelle Robin with Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. And I believe if you'll change one thing a month, one thing for the next 12 months, you'll change your life forever. Thanks for joining me on the journey. Welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. I want to give a shout out to our partners at Advent Health for helping us get this message out to the universe. Well, my guest today, I've been actually kind of stalking her for about 7 years, well, maybe not quite 7, 6 years, to be on this show because she's a sought after speaker. She is affectionately called the Rev by her spiritual community. Wendy has been a force in the effort toward global change for nearly 40 years. Her personal mission to teach everyday spiritual wisdom for conscious living and global transformation inspires and informs all of her work. She's a graduate of Uni School of Christianity right here in Kansas City, correct, Wendy?
That's right.
An ordained minister since 1980. Just a few years later, she founded the Unity Center, a 500-member spiritual community located in San Diego, California, where she currently serves as CEO and spiritual director. It's a great church, spiritual leader. I've been out at that church. Some of you may or may not know I spent a lot of time in San Diego as a kid. I lived there for several years, and then it's one of my favorite places to travel. Yeah. So with Wendy's strong interest in spirituality, motivated social action, Wendy and the Unity Center community were instrumental in the formation of San Diego Department of Peace. It has since become Americans for the Department of Peace and now encompasses all of Southern California. I want to have a thoughtful conversation with her today in light of all the fascinating things going on in the world right now. One of my coaches, Dr. Tom Hill, says, be fascinated instead of frustrated. Yeah. And I know some of us are definitely frustrated and fascinated with what's going on. So Wendy, first of all, why did you become a minister?
Oh gosh, that's a really long story. I have to give you the short version of that story then. I had no intention of becoming a minister. My background and my passion as a young person was ice skating. I was in ice capades for a very, very short period of time. And I was introduced to Unity by my grandmother. She wanted me to visit the church she was going to. I reluctantly said yes, as long as I only needed to go one time. And then I started a whole course of study and applying some of the ideas and started to get nightmares about the idea of going into ministry. And so it was really a calling. It was not something I ever consciously thought of. In fact, I resisted it.
You know, it's interesting. We were talking before the show went live that I got introduced to Unity back in the late 80s, early 90s when I moved to Kansas City to go to chiropractic college. And Mark Victor Hansen, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul for our audience, he was speaking at the school. A lot of chiropractors, we've always been into self-help and how do we become our best version of ourselves. Part of going way back to our founder story back in, gosh, late 1800s about thoughts, traumas, and toxins, a whole nother story. But that's how I found Unity. And I was either fortunate or not fortunate enough. I was not raised in any religion. All the neighbors took me to church. I've been to Catholic church, Baptist church, Methodist church, good old evangelical Christian churches. And I pretty much love church no matter where I go. But I really fell in love with Unity and the kindness, which will lead to one of our discussions today. So thanks again for joining me today. What has been some of the surprises along the journey the last 40 years? Wow.
It has been a long journey. Well, golly, what have been some of the surprises? I had a very naive understanding of what it would be like to lead a spiritual community. I was very, very young. I'm the youngest person to have been ordained in Unity. I was 23 at the time I received my ordination. I've been doing this for 40 years, just this last summer. But I really thought that everybody went to church for the same reasons that I did, which was to learn and to grow and to think the highest and best of everyone. And what I discovered is people are people, whether we're talking about church or anywhere else. And there are varying degrees of emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity, and that shows up in the church community.
Well, that's it. We can go down probably an hour down that question. So why do you think people go to church? If they're not for those reasons?
Well, I think some do, obviously, go for those reasons. But I think the reason people are seeking out spiritual community now is because they're hungering. Something is missing in their lives. Mm-hmm. And they have probably explored all all other ideas probably have explored, trying to get their satisfaction just from work or just from relationships, only to discover that as rich as our relationships may be and as satisfying as our careers may be, that we are something more than that. We include that, but we're something more. And that more peace to me is the spiritual peace. And I think that even when people don't necessarily identify it as that the longing that many are feeling, or the emptiness many are feeling, is the only satisfaction or way to satisfy that is through some sort of spiritual practice. And so I think that's what pulls people into or back into spiritual community.
Well, you use the word peace there, and I wonder. So let's go to pre-COVID, and I'm sure you have some different thoughts about now that we're during COVID. So when you think about the word peace before COVID, because I believe that we were pretty unrest before, and this is just throwing gasoline on a fire. So what are your beliefs, and what are you seeing as you're sitting heart to heart and soul to soul with people around peace?
So if you're talking about like our lifestyles pre-COVID, I would say 100% I agree with you. We as a society have had a long stint of misplaced priorities, I think, and have gotten very much in a mentality of more is always better, and rush, rush, rush from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And I think we've lost sight of some of the basic things that really make life and living wonderful and satisfying. And in the franticness of the kind of pace and lifestyle I think we had become accustomed to, we lost that sense of inner peace and joy in more simple things. And COVID has put us in a place where we are experiencing ourselves and experiencing our lives and experiencing one another in ways that we've never been forced to live before. And I think for those that have chosen to recognize this time as an opportunity to step back and to reflect, those are the individuals who are emerging and saying, I don't necessarily want to go back to normal. That doesn't mean I don't want to be free and be able to go out to the restaurant and all those cool things, pre-COVID. But the idea of going back to that same pace and those same values, I think people are shifting and are saying, I want to take what I have harvested, the learnings and the insights during this time of isolation, and put them front and center in my life.
I'm thinking about the word peace, and on this show, we like to celebrate, guide, connect, which provide hope. So we're celebrating you and your congregation, and just in the Association of Global New Thoughts, all the wonderful things you've been involved in. Like I said, I've been following you for a while, about how you've been trying to create peace, not only on earth, but peace within ourselves. And, the model I like to use in our center at Your Wellness Connection is called the Quadrants of Well-Being: mechanical, chemical, energetical, psycho-spiritual. Mm-hmm. My love really is, if I was not a doctor of chiropractic, I probably would have been a minister, because I love the healing of the heart. And I really feel that if people heal their heart, they'll do what they need to do to take care of this amazing gift we have in our body. So mm-hmm. I'm thinking of the word peace and inner peace, and people have been challenged with that. Not just this year, but also really this year is in another level. What are some of the, you have I think a word, an acronym you use, CALM. You want to dive into that a little bit with how people can maybe have more inner peace?
Well, and that came to me, Michelle, early into COVID. And I thought, okay, what are some simple things to hold on to? And I love the name of your broadcast, Small Changes, Big Shifts, because I actually believe that's the most powerful way that we do change. Mm-hmm. It can be overwhelming if we think, oh my gosh, I want to make these major changes in my life and be this much kinder, more aware and spiritually evolved person. That can sound enormous. But who among us can't pick one or two things to begin to put into consistent practice in our lives to make a difference from the inside out? And so the idea behind CALM was simply compassionate, awake, loving, and mindful, and to keep that almost as a lens through which you go about your day, you drive your car. Am I in a place of calmness? If not, what piece of that might I practice right now? What would it look like to be the most compassionate, awake, loving, mindful driver right now? What would it be like to be the most compassionate, awake, loving, mindful person who answers the phone or does whatever work is ours to do in the world, whether it's formal paid work or work in retirement or work in the home, to have simple practices that call us up into a different way of being. I use all sorts of little things.
It's fascinating to think about that. And thank you for acknowledging the small changes, big shifts. When COVID started for me, the word I kept hearing was, Michelle, you've got to find some rhythm to have resilience through this reset. Those are the words I kept hearing. And our tagline used to be put the odds in your favor. We actually changed it for this show and based on hearing those words over and over.
Right.
How do people learn to listen to those words? How do they learn to listen to their inner knowing?
It's not that hard, but it does take consistent practice. And I don't believe there's any way to do it other than setting aside periods of time, and they can be brief, that we actually unplug from the external, that we don't have our phones, we don't have the television on, that we sit in a space of stillness and quiet. And there's I was teaching a class earlier today, and we were talking a lot about mindfulness practice. And I have such gratitude for how much these ideas are being mainstreamed now. And so it's about having a mindful practice that we turn to every day and that we cultivate. And I believe that we cultivate it by consistency.
I love what you said. It's not that hard. It just takes kind of a rhythm, a consistent thing where you sit with it. So when you think about the word compassion, and we're in total transparency, we're working on this 31-day kindness campaign that launches on October 14th. And I'm trying to think about what's the word compassion really mean to you? Kind of a word nerd. So trying to really think about what does it mean? How can people practice it? Maybe give us 2 or 3 examples.
I think it means being kind-hearted. I think it means listening with the ears of the heart to whatever someone is saying to us. So if we're in conversation, that we're listening, excuse me, with the ears of the heart, that we listen with soft eyes. To me, being compassionate is being mindful of the other, not discounting myself, but being mindful of the other, being curious if the other is coming with an edge or an energy of anger or frustration, to give the benefit of the doubt and to be curious or fascinated, to use the word you used earlier, as to why might that be so.
That word curious makes me kind of giggle, especially watching some social feeds and just watching what's going on in the world right now. It's like, can I be curious about their beliefs or their thoughts or the way they're responding? Whew.
This is not an easy time to practice these things. It really isn't, because if we're really deeply committed to living mindfully, if we're really deeply committed to seeing the goodness in unity, we believe that we are each, the spark of the divine is within each of us. Doesn't matter our past, doesn't matter our faith, doesn't matter our sexual orientation. The same spark of the divine exists within each of us. And it is right now, we're in such a contentious time. To practice holding that is not for the faint of heart. But the fact that it's difficult does not excuse us from at least making the attempt to do so.
Well, I'm going to encourage people listening today to think about how you can listen with an open heart and soft eyes. It was really well said. And Liz, thanks for tuning in and always sharing some wisdom in the comments for us. You've got a movement called the New Thought Movement and Virtual White Allies Gathering to help combat racism.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was sharing with you before the show went on, I got a chance to be on a call with my business women's group, and we had Jane Elliott share a little bit. She wrote Brown Eyes, or did the study with Brown Eyes, Blue Eyes, and wow, what a powerful person she is, but also, with the movement you're doing. So tell me kind of why and how, things like that.
So if you're speaking more specifically of the racial equity work that we're doing, the how and the why of that, Michelle, actually came as a result of compassionate listening. So early in 2017, I started to become much more interested in educating myself around the topics of racial literacy. And I won't go into how and why that happened, but it really escalated in, I think it was the summertime, right after Charlottesville, the Unite the Right riots in 2017. And I found myself, my heart breaking open, saying, where is the intersection between one's spirituality, one's spiritual practice, and the real heartbreaking issues in the world and injustices racially? And I had remembered a conversation I had with a friend of mine, a Black man, very close friend of mine. And I started to hear examples in his life. He shared an example of having left his house without his wallet and being worried and concerned to be driving his car without his wallet. Now, this was an experience in his life many, many years ago. And I said to him, wait a minute, why would you be so concerned about not having your wallet? It was like a toss away comment he made, but it wasn't a toss away comment to me. And I said, why would you be so concerned about leaving your house without your wallet? And he proceeded to talk to me about what it was like to be a Black man. And now, mind you, Michelle, we had been friends, traveling, vacationing, my family with his family, for at least 10 years by that time. And it struck me in the most profound way that here was someone who is a genuine friend of mine. And as a white woman, I had never even thought to ask him any questions about his lived experiences. I thought, because I don't think I have an issue based on color of skin, and he's my friend, and we treat each other with love and respect. Why would I even open a conversation? I didn't know what I didn't know, but I listened with a compassionate heart. And then after the events of Charlottesville, I realized, you know what? There's probably a whole lot I don't know that I don't know. And I have a moral and ethical responsibility to listen. So I called the Black members of my church, and I put forth an invitation. I said, I hope this comes across properly, but I'm wondering what the Unity Center can do in the field of racial equity that might somehow make a positive difference. And this was years before George Floyd and seeing his murder on television. And I sat for 6 months, once a month, for almost 3 to 4 hours each sitting with my Black members. And I said, will you talk to me? Will you help me understand what your lived experience is? Because I'm clear, I don't know what it is. And I believe we have a very real and deep problem in our country that is not going to go away until we have some real conversations and then work together to change it. So out of that grew meeting with my Black members, as I said, for a period of 6 months, not knowing anything other than, will you talk to me and I will listen. Mm-hmm. When we started to when it felt like that was coming to completion, they hadn't given me any marching orders of go do this. And I remember asking, well, what do we do now? I mean, I've been listening. And to a person, my Black member said, you have to call your white people. You have to stand before the congregation and say, you're calling all your white people anyone who wants to be an aspiring white ally and sit with them. You need to create a safe space for them to talk to you about race, for them to learn about racial literacy, racial awareness. And so I did that. And I did that with 2 different groups for 6 months of my time with each group. We watched videos, we learned techniques, we studied materials long before George Floyd, before there was a national conversation going on. And my white people started to wake up, as did I. And we realized, all right, now how do we work together? I'll wind this up by saying where we are today is we are in the midst of forming another nonprofit, the Anti-Racism Institute, that will be dedicated to dismantling racism and building a genuinely equitable society. We will be focusing on creating measurable progress in racial literacy and helping to close the wealth gap. And there are 4 primary areas of focus: differentiation, which is going to include some sort of social entrepreneurship business model that will be self-funding to the Institute; collaboration by promoting interpersonal relationships between Black and white leaders in our San Diego community. We'll continue the education work that we've been doing of our white allies. I've been working virtually with 120 aspiring white allies for the last, when did I start? I think in August, maybe, from around the country, people who have heard of our work. And so differentiation, collaboration, education, and influence are going to be our primary ways of doing our part of building a more genuinely equitable, racially equitable society.
What are you most proud of with the work your team's doing?
Well, I'm proud of the vulnerability and courage of our white members who have put themselves voluntarily in a place of some really uncomfortable conversations and some deep reflection. And these are all good people. I mean, I believe people are inherently and basically good, but out of ignorance and not knowing what we don't know, we can make poor choices. And the people that I've been working with, both in my community and now the 120 nationally, the genuine authenticity and willingness to learn. And of course, now it's actually easier for white people, I think, because it's part of the national and global conversation. When I was doing this in my community initially, that wasn't so. We weren't, I mean, Black people were talking about it, but white people weren't talking about it. With my Black members, to be very frank with you, I've often wondered, the more I have learned, the more I wondered, how can you have been so tolerant and gracious and understanding, given the lived experiences you've told me you've had? So that part's very humbling to me.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I too have a lot of friends of color, and we've been having these conversations for years, quite frankly, about their kids. Because we have the one incident that make the news, and then they would start. You'd have a conversation, and of course now it's a daily conversation, which needed to happen. What are you hopeful about? I mean, because I believe right now, people are in despair, and we're wrestling with, so many issues, so many pandemics. What are you most hopeful about?
That we'll work on it together. Mm-hmm. When I listen to my Black members and friends, now the Black community is not a monolith any more than the white community is. But what I hear from my Black friends and colleagues is the hopefulness, because they're seeing more and more people coming together, white and Black and people of color coming together in ways and in numbers that we haven't seen before. I think that's hopeful. I think what gives me hope is the broadness of the conversations we're having. The one thing that I would probably be concerned about is it's going to take time to make these changes, because there is the individual awakening of largely of white people, at least getting exposed to information they didn't know because it's not taught in our history books. We have a very, pun intended, whitewashed presentation of our history as a country. And so it's going to take time, and it's going to also take systemic change. And that's hard work. And so I believe that we have to be willing to do that hard work. It's not going to go away just with individual people waking up and making their own individual choices differently. We also have to take that a little bit further. We've got to make sure that when we're voting for those who understand some policies need to be changed. We're willing to have those conversations, and we're willing to put our time, our energy, and our resources where they count.
You know, I'm curious, what's at stake if we don't make these changes from your perspective? What's at stake?
I think much greater division than we have even now. I think we as white people will lose the richness that comes from diversity and really understanding and appreciating the richness of human expression. I think we would lose that. I think that, I know you're familiar with unity, so I know that you have probably heard, we do not believe in the concept of original sin. We believe in the concept of original blessing. But I believe that slavery and the genocide of our Native American people by our European settlers is an original sin of our country that does need to at least be acknowledged, and then we move to heal from that. As a chiropractor, as somebody who is devoted to health and wellness, you know that if we get cut and we don't clean the infection and allow the infection to heal, it's going to be much, much worse. And I think that the racial inequity in our country is a wound that COVID and George Floyd's murder has opened up for us to see. And now it's time for us to do something about it in ways we never have before.
Yeah, I believe what you said there, thinking about how it was talked about in smaller circles, but now it's such a big conversation. And I think about, and I don't know if I heard this at Unity, you've got to reveal it to heal it.
Yes.
And so it's definitely been revealed that we've got major issues. And I want to go back to your word calm, compassionate, awake, loving, and mindful. And I think it's not just how to get through the days and have the peace, but how do we continue to have that, like in this women's group I'm involved in, somebody, a woman of color reached out to me and just brought up, I'm not sure we really feel included. And, I grew up I'm kind of a mutt, I grew up in an environment where I was kind of poor, but, I was around all different people. Plus I moved every 2 years. And so I had to work to fit in, but didn't work so hard at it because I knew I was moving again. So it's fascinating to hear people's perspective. I was like, well, if you feel that way, let's address it. Because if one person feels that way, then there's many others that feel that way. So I'm going to really take this acronym CALM, and I love acronyms. So I'm glad that you, compassionate, awake, loving, and mindful. Yeah. Speaking of that, how can we cultivate more love and kindness in this world and acceptance in communities? What action steps can we take today?
Well, in our communities, I think one of the things that we can do is to seek out those that are different than we are. So if I'm a white person, and now we have to be very mindful of the fact that not every Black person wants to be hearing from a white person right now necessarily. But the broader point that I want to make is, can we listen again with the ears of the heart to somebody whose life experience is quite different than ours because their ethnicity is different, or their political views are different, or their their economic or educational situation is quite different from ours. Can we listen to their lived experience without judging it, without saying, well, they probably didn't mean that. Maybe you're just too sensitive. Can we just listen? Can we just listen and give space?
You know, what it makes me think about is when the children sit on the grandparents' lap and they listen and they're intrigued with some of the stories they have to tell because they have history. And that's what I really go to my heart when you say that. Listen for the lived experiences and how rich they can help us. So that's immediately where my heart goes. And I don't recall having that experience as I've talked about this. So thank you for cracking my heart open to another level of awareness.
You know, Michelle, when in hearing you talk about the impact of the idea of listen, when I was part of the Association for Global New Thought's first synthesis dialogues with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1999, there was a young person toward the end of our dialogues, which went on for 5 days. There was a young person at the end who was very moved by all the things he was hearing the adults talk about. How do we help make the world a more loving and peaceful and kind place? And the Dalai Lama, so the young person asked, well, what can I do when I go home? And the Dalai Lama gave him 3 things. He said, study hard, love people like your mother loves you. Now, he made an assumption, right? But study hard, love people like your mother loves you, and travel and make friends. And I've never forgotten the last part, because the travel and make friends, he was pointing to, he wasn't talking about traveling to places and being with people that are just like you. He was talking about being with people that are different than you, very different than you, and let your worldview be a little more open and make friends with people who are different.
Such wise wisdom. Travel. So say the 3 again.
To study hard, to love like your mother loves you, and to travel and make friends.
You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking about a picture, and we have a mutual dear friend, Mary Ellen Wake,
Yes,
who really has been, she's been a mother in a way to me of guiding me through my spiritual mother, really helped me on the journey, led me to the Hoffman process, who our thoughts and prayers go out to Hoffman right now with the devastating fire at White Sulphur Springs this week. And I'm thinking about, I saw Mary last year, and on her mantle or her, altar, there's a picture of you guys with the Dalai Lama. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, I have that too. I have one in my home and I have one in my office.
Yeah, so, I think, is it right behind you?
Yes, it is, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, I've seen that picture many times in Mary's home, and so those of you listening, I encourage you to have the courage to listen. Once again, listen with an open heart and soft eyes. I love the soft eyes part. And have that conversation this week. Think about one of your friends. It doesn't have to be. It could be a Hispanic person, a white person, Caucasian, whatever you want to say. It could be one of your African American friends or Black friends, and even as simple as do I call you Black? Do I call you African American? Because I have a friend that's Haitian. She's not African American. She's Haitian, and we actually have a lake place, and we have such diverse friends, and it's like, okay, this week we have our Vietnamese friends here and our Haitian, and we're just all people. Right. I believe we're all just people. We have those 4 letters on our forehead, MMFI, make me feel important. Right. I want to matter, and at the end of our life, how do we matter? And you've given us some good guidance on that.
If I can I interject one thought?
Of course.
So one of my awakenings, and there have been many in doing this work, is how unaware we naturally are when we are part of the dominant culture. So living in the United States as a white person, we are part of the dominant culture. You don't have to feel badly or guilty about that. But by being part of the dominant culture, unless somebody brings it to our attention, we're not inclined to wonder how the other is experiencing our culture, whether it's an Asian friend or a Hispanic friend or anyone else on the spectrum that's not part of the dominant culture.
I love the word curious. Just be curious. It's kind of like when I consult with people, I do wellness consultations, and I'm just genuinely curious of why they have headaches or why they have back pain or why they have depression and anxiety. What happened from that little pure baby that came out that shifted so much? Was it the birth process? Was it a car accident? Was it a divorce? Was it a fire? And so I would say probably the top of the bubbles to the top for me from our conversation is just be curious about, gosh, I wonder why you feel that way. I wonder why you think that. And that will open your heart to another level.
And Rob, when you ask a question like that, and this comes out of some of the training materials I use with our white allies, and I want to acknowledge Dr. David Camp, who is a diversity training expert. And in some of his training materials called the White Allies Toolkit, he made a really good point. He says, when you're curious and in dialogue and asking somebody about, well, how did you come to believe the way that you do? To make sure that you ask for personal experiences, that it's not quoting what you just heard on the news, whatever news channel you turn to, that it's not referring to somebody else's opinion, but that if I tell you, well, I think all X people are XYZ, then you would say to me, can you give me an example of what's happened in your life to bring you personally to that point of view? That takes a conversation to a much deeper level than just why do you think the way you think.
A personal experience. That's a really good aha. If you're taking notes, I think that's a good aha, a personal experience there. It's interesting. I've done my fair share of studying. I love to learn and did a lot of genetics work, especially around after I had an accident because I had some memory issues and we have Alzheimer's in my family. And I found out my genes, but I remember talking to Dr. Jay Dunn, one of my now good friends and mentors on genetics, and somehow we're wired a certain way. And we know that have that genetic expression is expressed because of our experiences. But she said to me, Michelle, I could tell, and I didn't know her at all. We were talking over the phone at this time. She goes, oh, by your genes, you have the kindness gene. I was like, how do you tell that? Because kindness is probably in my top two values, along with generosity. And I thought that was super fascinating. And so we are getting ready to launch this kindness campaign that I'm going to invite our listeners to join us. We're on a mission to reach 1 million people with kindness to yourself. And I think what I hear you saying is it's hard to be open-minded and curious about other people when you're in so much pain. Yeah. So I'm going to invite you to be curious and be kind to yourself. And then how are you kind to the community? How are you kind to the environment? How are you kind to your friends? How are you kind to people that you don't know? Right. I love that there used to be a Secret Santa in Kansas City. And I think they've had other cities too. Do you guys have a Secret Santa in San Diego? Mm-hmm. And they would stay at the stoplights and they would be in their coats or look like they're maybe homeless, but they typically have on nice shoes. They said that's how you can tell maybe they're the Secret Santa. And people think they're wanting money, but they were giving money away.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that cool? The Secret Santa.
Okay, we don't have that kind of Secret Santa. I like that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, maybe Jesus or Buddha and just sharing their bread and sharing their food and sharing their clothes with people. You're much more well-read than I am on spirituality. What does that spark for you when I say that?
Oh, gosh. It sparks the feeling of aliveness that I experience when I know I'm doing something kind with no motivation for what's in it for me. And it can run the gamut of things, whether it's a kind word or a note or an unexpected little gift that I don't even let the person know it's from me. And I think the Dalai Lama has referred to it as enlightened selfishness, that when we give that way, there is something we receive. Every morning, just about every morning except Sunday morning, I go for a walk of a couple of miles. And there are a number of older people in my neighborhood that walk their dogs at the same time I'm out walking by myself. And I started carrying dog treats with me. And these are people I don't know, and I don't know their dogs, although I do now. And they recognize when Wendy comes down the road. And the joy it gives me, and the smile on the face of the person walking the dog, and the simplicity of them saying, "You are so kind." And I think, boy, it doesn't take very much, does it? Just to put yourself out there. Joan Borsenko, Dr. Joan Borsenko, was one of our participants in one of the dialogues that we did with the Dalai Lama. And I remember having a meal with her. And I don't know how we got on the conversation, but she said something to me I've never forgotten. And it relates to this idea of kindness and compassion. She said, busyness is the murderer of compassion. I have never forgotten that, because I've noticed in myself that my natural desire to be kind and compassionate begins to diminish when I have become so busy that I'm trying to fit in one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. I can hear it in my voice. I can hear it. I can feel it in the impatience I might have for the other person to just finish whatever you're doing. Busyness, the murderer of compassion. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that.
There's a lot of wisdom that, I'm a huge Joan Borsenko fan. She actually had her on the show here, probably 20, was the first 2 seasons on my birthday. I remember it very much because she tells a story about healing with her mother. And I had some drama and trauma with my mother, like many people. And once I was able to develop compassion for her, I'd have more compassion for a homeless person I did for my mother. And I had to really look at that and start to heal inside my heart. And she was very pivotal in my healing with my mother. So thank you for bringing her up. Yeah. There's so many wonderful teachers on the planet. And so once again, we're celebrating you today. And I want to celebrate your book as we start to shift the show and start to wind down. I want you to tell us a little bit about your book. Ask yourself this: questions to open the heart, expand the mind, and awaken the soul. What would you like to share in regards to your book?
It was a fun book to put together and a meaningful book for me to put together. I was blessed and challenged by my relationship with my father. Very, very difficult relationship, but a very brilliant man. And he always encouraged me and my brother and my sister to ask really good questions, to be as interested in the quality of the questions that we ask as the pursuit of the answers. And what he tried to get us to do was to use our minds in creative ways and to understand that the quality of the answers we get are influenced a lot by the kinds of questions we ask ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I started playing with that idea of, well, are there some really good questions that I could offer and create a series of lessons or a book from? So it came as a result of that. And with each of the kinds of, so the book has 8 different areas of questions that I pose and some stories that support examples of it. But it's a very short read, but it's not about reading the book. It's about taking the questions and then taking them inside and really coming up with your own answers to those questions.
I'm thinking about this whole conversation we've been having about racism and equality, and that I think the questions, that's a perfect way to start to really transition this show is what questions can you be asking of yourself as well as those others around you. And I'm going to remind you all to be curious. Wendy, is the best place to find you on Facebook or your website? Where's the best place for people to learn more about you?
Probably the Facebook and our website. The website is theunitycenter.net, and our Facebook pages are connected with that as well.
Facebook.com, you see it right there on the screen, / Reverend Wendy, or the, what did you say, Center, Unity Spirit? No.
The website is theunitycenter.net.
theunitycenter.net. 40 years. Wow.
Yeah.
40 years. If you had a magic wand, what would you do?
I would do everything I could to help people awaken, to live more mindfully and more compassionately as an individual, but to not stop there, to know that it's not about only our own individual awakening, that we need to continue to be willing to draw a circle wider and to open our hearts wider, to heal our world and to nourish ourselves.
Open your heart wider. I know this conversation is, as I mentioned earlier, cracked my heart open another level. Thank you for that inspiring conversation. What do you think is the medicine that God has put inside your heart to share with the world?
I think it's probably two pieces: inspiring and informing. I think learning, information, knowledge is important. And I think inspiring others is critical. And that speaks to something we've talked about quite a bit in the show, and that is hope.
Yeah, well, the show, once again, we have 4 words: celebrate, guide, connect, hope. We're celebrating you. You give us some great guidance. We've got connected to you, and we have hope. It's interesting. I feel like my medicine is connection. And thank you for saying yes to being on the show today. Give a shout out to, once again, our friend Mary, Reverend Mary Omwake.
Yeah.
For first connecting with you, and then my dear friend Pam Davis, who reconnected me with you. And Pam, hey Pam, we love you. We're thinking about you. Speaking
Hi,
of
Pam.
having a good conversation. Thanks again for joining me. I love to end the show with a quote. Do you have a quote that inspires you today to share with our audience?
Oh, gosh. I can't believe, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Be the change.
Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Be the change. Well, I want to remind you can find Reverend Wendy at theunitycenter.net. It's on the screen there. I've got a quote for you today. It's one of your quotes, Wendy. What creates more joy, more happiness, more contentment? And I believe all of you want to have more joy. And in the dictionary under well-being, which you think about, why is a chiropractor that does wellness, why would I care about all the things we're talking about? Because well-being means happiness. It's hard to be happy when you're having disconnection or a stomachache, a headache, or you just don't feel like you belong. And so hopefully we're creating a platform where you feel like you can plug in and without shame, without guilt, and make those small changes that will lead to big shifts so you can build resilience and rhythm in your life. So here's the quote again that I just interrupted. What creates more joy, more happiness, more contentment than a simple sense of fun? And I've had a fun time sharing with you today. Once again, opening my heart. So thank you for that wisdom. I'm going to encourage all of you to check out Reverend Wendy. Also to follow, and you'll see in our show notes here and all over Facebook and LinkedIn. You're going to see this a lot the next month. My team is working diligently. We're spending every single extra free minute we have on this kindness campaign. And I'm going to give a shout out to Emily and Bailey and Zach and Desiree and Kelly and Emily for all the work you're doing, and Laura, and all the work you're doing to spread kindness. And so I know without a doubt, you're probably going to see it in your feeds. And take the risk, push, click, sign up, join us, and help us spread the good. More than ever, we need it now. If you don't feel compelled to do it, fine. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to your neighbors. Take some dog. I should just grab some extra treats when I'm walking my dog. That's a good idea. So, hey, have a great day. Thanks for sharing with me. I'll chat with you all soon. Have a good week.
Thank you.
I sure appreciate you listening to Small Changes, Big Shifts. If you go to the website, smallchangesbigshifts.com, we'll have the show notes ready for you there. If this episode inspired you to make a small change that will lead to a big shift, please share with a friend. You can catch our episode on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and our website. And if you feel like it, please leave a rating or a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch our episode next week. Blessings to you.